1348, a man named Richard the Raker fell through the rotten wooden planks covering his own cesspit and drowned in layers of accumulated human waste, his own and his neighbors, built up over years. What makes this story unsettling isn't just how he died, but the fact that no one found it unusual. It wasn't rare. It was part of everyday life in medieval England. If you had been alive then, this is the world you would have stepped into. A place where the boundary between civilization and open sewage was often nothing more than a few fragile boards. Most people lived harsh, physically demanding lives, with nearly 80% of the population working in agriculture. There was no understanding of germs, no concept of bacteria or infection as we know it today. Disease was explained through superstition, imbalance in the body, or even the movement of planets. And before you saw anything, before you understood anything, you would smell it. That would be your first introduction. London, in 1348, held around 70 to 80,000 people, packed into roughly 1 square mile, dense, crowded, and overwhelming. Unlike a modern city, it had no sewage system, no garbage collection, and no clean separation between drinking water and waste. Instead, it had the Fleet River, which served at once as a water source, a transport route, and an open sewer. Slaughterhouses dumped blood and remains directly into it, while tanneries poured chemical waste into the same flow. Latrines along its banks emptied straight into the water. Over time, it became so polluted that parts of it were referred to as the Fleet Ditch. But technically, it was still considered a river. The smell alone became unbearable long before the plague arrived. Religious figures and officials even filed formal complaints about it, which says a lot about how severe it must have been. Authorities attempted solutions, like instructing butchers to dump waste into the river instead of the streets. But this only shifted the problem, not solved it. Even the king himself later complained about the streets being filled with human waste and the air becoming dangerous to breathe. This wasn't a rare crisis, it was daily life. Animals added to the chaos. Pigs roamed freely through the streets. Not the domesticated versions we imagine today, but aggressive, tusked animals closer to wild boars. They dug through garbage, attacked people, and sometimes even disturbed graves. Some had bells tied to them so people could hear them coming, a small warning in an otherwise unpredictable environment. Inside homes, sanitation was just as primitive. Wealthier people used structures called garderobes, essentially toilets built into castle walls that dropped waste directly into pits or moats. Clothing was often stored nearby because the ammonia fumes were believed to repel pests. For common people, chamber pots were used at night and emptied in the morning, sometimes straight into the streets. Laws required people to shout warnings before dumping waste out of windows, but beyond that, there was little control. Cesspits frequently leaked into nearby properties and even into drinking water sources. Despite this, medieval people weren't as dirty as often imagined. Many washed regularly, cleaned their hands and faces daily, and followed basic hygiene practices. Soap existed, though often homemade, and linen clothing helped absorb dirt. Public bathhouses were common across Europe, serving not only for cleanliness, but also as social spaces. In some cities, dozens of bathhouses operated regularly, and people would bathe, eat, and socialize at the same time. However, compared to the Islamic world, European hygiene lagged behind. Cities like Cordoba had running water, street lighting, and hundreds of bathhouses centuries earlier. Cleanliness was deeply tied to religious practice, with routine washing built into daily life. European visitors during the Crusades were often described as neglecting hygiene in comparison. The real tragedy wasn't that people didn't care about cleanliness, It was that they didn't understand disease. Medical knowledge was based on flawed theories. One believed that illness came from imbalances in bodily fluids. Another blamed bad air from rotting matter. And the most widespread explanation was that disease was divine punishment. In 1348, leading scholars concluded that a rare alignment of planets had poisoned the air itself. These ideas shaped treatments, which were often ineffective or harmful. Bloodletting was common. Doctors drained blood to restore balance, even though it weakened patients further. Other treatments included burning infected areas, using herbal mixtures, or even placing live animals against wounds in the hope of drawing out disease. Doctors themselves were afraid. Many avoided patients altogether. Those who did treat the sick often admitted they could do little. There were no cures, no real understanding, and no way to stop what was coming. Water, food, and daily survival all carried risks. Drinking water was often contaminated by the same waste it flowed through. Bread could be infected with fungi that caused hallucinations or even death. Even basic medical care could be more dangerous than the illness itself. And then the Black Death arrived. It began far away, spreading through trade routes and reaching Europe through ports. Ships carried it across the Mediterranean, and within months, it spread rapidly from city to city. It moved faster than information, faster than people could react. Entire populations collapsed. In some cities, half or more of the population died within months. Families abandoned each other out of fear. Mass graves became common because there were too many bodies to bury individually. Chroniclers described streets filled with the sick and dying, and a constant sense that death was unavoidable. Doctors failed. Leaders died. Even royalty couldn't escape it. Fear spread alongside the disease, leading to desperate and often violent reactions. Groups blamed minorities, and entire communities were attacked based on false accusations. At the same time, others turned to extreme religious practices, believing suffering could stop the plague. Ironically, fear of disease eventually led to worse hygiene. Bathhouses began to close as people started believing that water opened the body to infection. Over time, practices that once helped maintain cleanliness disappeared, making conditions even worse in later centuries. If you had lived through 1348, your chances of survival would have been uncertain at best. You would have lived surrounded by waste, drinking contaminated water, and relying on medicine that didn't work. You would have watched people around you disappear in a matter of weeks. And if you survived, the world left behind would be unrecognizable, emptied, changed, and permanently marked by what had happened. The Black Death didn't just kill millions, it reshaped society. Labor became valuable because workers were scarce. Old systems began to weaken. Governments slowly started to take responsibility for public health. But all of that came later. In 1348, none of those changes existed yet. There was only uncertainty, fear, and a world that had no idea what was happening to it, or how to stop it.